The world went sideways in a heartbeat, wood splintering and canvas tearing as the wagon wheel caught the edge of the frozen ravine, and Fiona Foster felt herself thrown against the side panel before everything became a blur of white and cold. She had been traveling alone from Denver to meet her sister in California, a journey that seemed foolish now as the December wind howled through the mountain pass and snow piled higher with each passing hour. The wagon tilted at an impossible angle, then rolled completely over, spilling trunks and bags and one terrified woman into a snowdrift so deep she disappeared beneath the surface. Fiona could not breathe. The snow packed around her face, filling her mouth and nose, the weight of it crushing her chest as she struggled to determine which way was up. Her fingers clawed uselessly at the white wall surrounding her, panic flooding her veins with ice colder than the storm itself. She had read about people dying this way, suffocated in avalanches or buried in drifts, found weeks later when the spring thaw revealed their frozen bodies. The thought made her fight harder, but her heavy skirts tangled around her legs, and the buffalo coat she had been so grateful for this morning now felt like an anchor dragging her deeper into oblivion. Just as darkness crept into the edges of her vision, strong hands seized her shoulders and pulled. The world shifted again, and suddenly she broke through the surface, gasping and coughing as precious air filled her lungs. She blinked snow from her eyelashes, trying to focus on the figure kneeling beside her in the drift. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face mostly hidden by a thick scarf wrapped around his nose and mouth. Only his eyes showed, a striking blue-green that reminded her of the mountain lakes in summer, and they studied her with an intensity that made her forget the cold for just a moment. "Can you move?" His voice came muffled through the scarf, but she heard the urgency in it. "Can you feel your hands and feet?" Fiona tried to nod, then coughed again, spitting out snow. "I think so. My horse dead. Broke its neck in the fall. I am sorry." He was already pulling her up, strong arms lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. "We need to get out of this wind before we both freeze. My ranch is 2 miles northwest. Can you ride? I can do whatever I must to survive." Her teeth chattered so violently she could barely form the words. He carried her to where a large bay gelding stood ground-tied, its hindquarters to the wind, and lifted her onto the saddle before swinging up behind her. One arm came around her waist, pulling her back against his chest, and she felt the solid warmth of him even through all their layers of winter clothing. "Hold on," he said, and kicked the horse into motion. Fiona had never been so cold in her entire 22 years. She had grown up in Boston, where winters were harsh, and she had just spent 3 months in Denver, where the mountain air bit with teeth, but this was different. This was the kind of cold that made bones ache and skin burn, that turned fingers and toes into wooden stumps that no longer seemed attached to her body. She huddled against the stranger's chest, trying to absorb his heat, as the horse pushed through drifts that sometimes reached its belly. "What is your name?" he had to shout to be heard over the wind. "Fiona Foster." Her lips felt thick and clumsy. "Yours, Jack Sullivan. You picked a hell of a day to travel alone through the Rockies, Miss Foster. Mrs. Foster." The lie came automatically, the fiction she had maintained since leaving Denver. A woman traveling alone faced fewer questions if people believed her to be a widow. "And I had no choice. My sister is expecting me." "Well, Mrs. Foster, you are coming home with me, at least until this storm passes." His arm tightened around her waist as the horse stumbled, then recovered. "No arguments. You would be dead in an hour if I left you out here, and I am not about to have that on my conscience." Fiona wanted to protest, wanted to maintain some shred of propriety and independence, but she knew he spoke the truth. She had no wagon, no horse, no supplies, and no idea where she was beyond somewhere in the Colorado Territory mountains in the winter of 1875. She was entirely at this man's mercy, and the realization should have terrified her, but instead she felt only a strange calm. Perhaps it was the cold numbing her mind along with her body, or perhaps it was something in the steady way he held her, the confidence in his voice that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. The 2 miles felt like 20, but eventually buildings emerged from the white curtain of falling snow. A ranch house, sturdy and low to the ground, built to withstand the brutal mountain winters. A barn, several smaller outbuildings, corrals with rails barely visible above the drifts. Jack guided the horse directly to the barn, dismounting in a single fluid motion before reaching up to lift Fiona down. Her legs buckled when her feet touched the ground, and he caught her easily, swinging her into his arms again. "Get the door," he called, and a young man appeared from the shadows inside the barn, eyes widening when he saw the woman in Jack's arms. "Boss, what found her in a snowdrift? Wagon overturned. Get Charlie and go back for whatever you can salvage before the storm buries it completely." 2 miles southeast, near the Devil's Spine Pass. Jack was already moving toward the house, carrying Fiona as though she might shatter if he set her down. And take care of Thunder. He earned his oats today. The ranch house interior hit her like a wall of heat. A fire roared in the stone fireplace, filling the main room with blessed warmth that made her skin prickle and burn as sensation returned. Jack set her on her feet near the hearth, then began efficiently stripping off her wet outer garments. The buffalo coat, soaked through and heavy. Her wool shawl frozen stiff. Her gloves, which had to be peeled from her hands finger by finger. "Can you remove your boots?" He was already kneeling, working at the laces before she could answer. "We need to check for frostbite. How long were you in the snow before I found you?" "I do not know." Minutes. It felt like hours. Fiona's teeth still chattered, making speech difficult. "How did you happen to find me? That road is not well traveled." "I was checking on my herd in the north pasture when I saw buzzards circling, went to investigate and found your wagon instead." He pulled off her boots, then her stockings, examining her toes carefully. "These look all right. Pink and warm. Fingers." She held out her hands, and he inspected them with the same thorough attention, his touch surprisingly gentle for someone with such calloused hands. Ranch work, she thought. He had the look of someone who spent his days outdoors in all weathers, doing hard physical labor. His face, now that he had unwrapped the scarf, was weathered and tanned even in winter, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often. He looked to be in his late 20s, perhaps 30, with dark hair that curled slightly where it brushed his collar and a jaw shadowed with several days of beard growth. "I think you will keep all your digits," he said, a hint of humor in his voice. "You are a lucky woman, Mrs. Foster." "Another 20 minutes and we might be having a different conversation." "I owe you my life, Mr. Sullivan." Fiona meant it with every fiber of her being. "I cannot adequately express my gratitude. You can start by drinking this." He moved to the kitchen area, returning with a tin cup filled with something that steamed. "Whiskey and hot water. It will warm you from the inside." She took the cup, wrapping both hands around it to absorb the heat, and sipped cautiously. The whiskey burned going down, but it was a good burn, spreading warmth through her chest and belly. She drank more, feeling the shivers that had racked her body begin to ease. Jack pulled a chair closer to the fire and gestured for her to sit, then draped a thick blanket over her shoulders. "I am going to make some coffee and something to eat. You just sit there and get warm. When you are ready, we can talk about what happens next." Fiona watched him move around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, stoking the stove, measuring coffee into a pot, slicing bread from a large loaf. His home was clean and well kept, which surprised her. Most bachelor quarters she had seen, and she had seen more than her share while traveling, tended toward chaos and neglect. But Jack Sullivan's ranch house had an organized, almost tidy quality, as though he took pride in his surroundings. "You live here alone?" The question escaped before she could consider whether it was appropriate. "Mostly. I have 2 ranch hands who bunk in the small cabin behind the barn, Charlie and Tom. They have worked for me for 3 years now. Good men, both of them." He poured coffee into 2 cups, brought one to her. "I built this place 5 years ago, after I mustered out of the cavalry and decided I had enough of taking orders. Bought the land with my army pay and have been building the herd ever since. It is a lovely home." And it was, in a rustic, practical way. The furniture was simple but well made, the floors swept clean, the windows, though small, fitted with real glass. A bookshelf near the fireplace held perhaps 24 volumes, more than she would have expected. "Do you ever get lonely out here away from town?" Jack shrugged, returning to the kitchen to turn bacon in a skillet. "Sometimes, but I prefer the company of horses and cattle to most people I have met, present company excepted, of course." The bacon smell made Fiona's stomach growl, reminding her that she had not eaten since dawn, a piece of hard bread and cheese consumed while urging her poor dead horse onward through the deepening snow. "How far is the nearest town?" "Fort McDowell is about 15 miles southwest." "Small place, more of a trading post than a proper town, but they have a general store and a saloon. Stage comes through once a week in good weather." He glanced toward the window, where snow continued to fall in thick sheets. "Might be a while before the stage runs again, though. This storm looks like it plans to settle in for a few days." A few days. Fiona absorbed this information, trying to calculate what it meant for her journey, for her plans. She was supposed to meet her sister Catherine in Sacramento by Christmas, just 3 weeks away. Catherine was the only family she had left in the world since their parents had died of fever 2 years ago, and they had been apart for nearly 6 months while Catherine established herself in California with her new husband. The letters had been full of descriptions of sunshine and orange groves, a paradise that seemed impossibly far away now as Fiona sat wrapped in a blanket by a stranger's fireplace in the Colorado mountains. "You said you were traveling to meet your sister." Jack had an uncanny ability to read her thoughts, or perhaps her face was simply too transparent. "Where?" "Sacramento. She married last spring and moved west with her husband. He has a dry goods business there." Fiona took another sip of the whiskey-laced water, feeling warmth spread through her limbs. "I was supposed to take the stage from Denver, but it was full, so I bought a wagon and horse and decided to make my own way. It seemed like a good idea at the time." A woman traveling alone across the frontier in winter. Jack shook his head, but his tone held more admiration than censure. "You are either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish, Mrs. Foster. I have not decided which. Perhaps a bit of both." Fiona managed a small smile. "I have been told I am too independent for my own good. Independence is not a flaw." He brought 2 plates to the small table near the fireplace, each loaded with bacon, fried potatoes, and thick slices of bread. "It just requires a certain amount of common sense to go along with it. Come, eat. You need food as much as warmth right now." The meal was simple but delicious, and Fiona ate with an appetite that might have embarrassed her under other circumstances. Jack ate with the same efficiency he brought to everything else, and they shared a companionable silence broken only by the crackle of the fire and the howl of wind around the eaves. When the plates were empty, he poured more coffee, and they moved back to chairs by the hearth. "I will give you my room tonight," Jack said. "I can bunk with Charlie and Tom in the cabin. You need proper rest and you need to stay warm. I cannot turn you out of your own bed." Fiona protested immediately. "I can sleep here by the fire. I have done worse on this journey." "You will take the bed, Mrs. Foster, and that is final." His tone brooked no argument. "The bedroom stays warmer than the main room, and I will not have you taking a chill after everything you have been through today. Besides, I have slept in the bunkhouse plenty of times. It is no hardship." Fiona wanted to argue further, but exhaustion was creeping over her like a heavy quilt, weighing down her limbs and making her eyelids droop. The warmth, the food, the trauma of the accident and her near-death experience were all catching up with her at once. She nodded slowly. "Thank you. You are very kind. I am practical." But his eyes held a warmth that suggested otherwise. "Come, I will show you the room." He led her to a door off the main room, opening it to reveal a small bedroom dominated by a large bed piled high with quilts and blankets. A dresser stood against one wall, a washstand with basin and pitcher against another. The room was cold, but Jack quickly lit a small stove in the corner, adjusting the flue until flames danced behind the grate. That should warm things up quickly. "There is water in the pitcher, though it might be frozen. I can bring hot water if you want to wash." He paused in the doorway. "I will have Tom bring in your trunk when they return with your things, assuming they can find it in the snow. Thank you, Mr. Sullivan, for everything." Fiona met his eyes, trying to convey the depth of her gratitude. "I truly do not know how I can ever repay you. No repayment necessary. It is what any decent person would do." He tipped his head in a small nod. "Sleep well, Mrs. Foster. We can figure out what comes next after the storm passes." Alone in the room, Fiona sat on the edge of the bed, her mind spinning. She was in a strange man's house, miles from anywhere, with a storm raging outside that might last for days. She should feel afraid, vulnerable, but instead she felt oddly safe. There was something about Jack Sullivan that inspired trust, despite their brief acquaintance. The way he had pulled her from the snow without hesitation, the gentle efficiency with which he had cared for her, the quiet strength he seemed to carry like a second skin. She lay back on the bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin, and was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow. When Fiona woke, pale winter light filtered through the small window, and for a moment she could not remember where she was. Then memory returned in a rush. The wagon overturning, the suffocating snow, strong arms pulling her free. She sat up, noting that her trunk now stood beside the dresser, along with two of her bags. Someone had been in the room while she slept, which should have alarmed her but somehow did not. She climbed out of bed, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles, and went to the window. The storm had stopped. Snow lay thick and pristine across the landscape, transforming the ranch into something from a winter fairy tale. The sun, low on the horizon, suggested it was either very early morning or late afternoon, and Fiona realized with some embarrassment that she had no idea how long she had slept. She opened her trunk, grateful to find her clothes dry and intact, and selected a practical wool dress in deep blue, along with fresh undergarments and stockings. The water in the pitcher was indeed frozen solid, but when she opened the bedroom door, she found a basin of steaming water sitting on a small table just outside, along with a towel and a bar of soap. Jack's thoughtfulness touched her more than she cared to examine. She washed quickly, braided her dark hair into a simple plait, and ventured into the main room. Jack stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot that smelled of beef and vegetables. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and a smile crossed his face. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Foster. How are you feeling? Afternoon. How long did I sleep? About 18 hours, give or take. It is just past 3 o'clock. He ladled stew into a bowl, set it on the table with a spoon and more of the thick bread. Sit, eat, you needed the rest. Fiona obeyed, too hungry to be self-conscious about her appetite. The stew was rich and hearty, perfect for a cold winter day, and she ate every drop before looking up to find Jack watching her with obvious amusement. You are a good cook, Mr. Sullivan. Please call me Jack. And you are easy to please, Mrs. Foster. He poured coffee for both of them. Do you prefer I call you Mrs. Foster, or would you be comfortable with me using your given name? Under the circumstances, formality seems a bit absurd. Fiona is fine. She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. And you are right. Given that you saved my life and I am currently living in your house, I think we can dispense with excessive propriety. Fiona. He said her name like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. It suits you. Irish. My grandmother was from County Cork. She came over during the famine with my grandfather. Fiona found herself relaxing into the easy conversation. What about Sullivan? That is Irish as well, is it not? It is. My father was born in Dublin, came to America as a boy. He used to tell stories about the old country, though I suspect half of them were fiction. Jack leaned back in his chair. He died when I was 15. My mother followed him a year later. I joined the army at 16, lied about my age. It seemed like the best option at the time. I am sorry about your parents. Fiona knew the hollow ache of loss too well. It is hard being alone in the world. You said your sister is your only family. When she nodded, he continued. Then you are not entirely alone. Family is precious, even when it is just one person. You should hold tight to that. They talked through the afternoon as the light faded and Jack lit lamps around the room. Fiona learned that he had served in the cavalry for 8 years, mostly on the plains, before being mustered out with an honorable discharge and a bullet scar on his left shoulder. He had come to Colorado because he wanted mountains and clean air, space to build something of his own. His ranch was small but growing, currently running about 200 head of cattle and a dozen horses. He broke and trained horses on the side, selling them to the army and to other ranchers, and had developed a reputation for patience and skill. In turn, Fiona found herself sharing more than she had intended about her own life. She told him about growing up in Boston, about her father's work as a clerk in a shipping office, and her mother's skill with a needle that had kept the family clothed and sometimes fed. She told him about the fever that had taken both parents within a week of each other, about the desperate scramble to pay debts and sell the small house, about Catherine's marriage to a man she barely knew and the subsequent move west. And you, Jack asked, why did you not marry? You must have had offers. I had offers. Fiona stared into her coffee, remembering, but none I wanted to accept. Most men who approached me were interested in a housekeeper and brood mare, not a partner. I wanted something different, something more. Good for you. Jack's simple approval warmed her more than the fire. Too many people settle for less than they deserve because they are afraid of being alone, but being alone is better than being trapped in misery. You understand? She looked up, meeting his eyes. Most people think I am foolish for refusing to marry. My aunt told me I would end up a dried-up spinster with nothing but regrets. Your aunt was wrong. Jack stood, began clearing the table. You will marry when and if you find someone who deserves you. And if that never happens, you will still have a life worth living. Marriage is not the only measure of a woman's value. Fiona felt something shift in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the coffee. She watched Jack move around the kitchen, washing dishes with the same careful attention he brought to everything, and found herself thinking thoughts that had no business in her head. She had known this man for barely a day. He had saved her life, yes, but that did not mean anything beyond simple human decency. And yet, there was something about him that drew her, something in the quiet strength and unexpected kindness, the way he treated her as an equal rather than a burden or an inconvenience. The door burst open, bringing a blast of cold air and two men covered in snow. Jack turned, one hand dropping automatically to the gun belt Fiona had not noticed until that moment, then relaxed. "Charlie, Tom, how are the cattle?" "Cold and stupid, same as always." The older of the two men, a grizzled fellow with a spectacular mustache, stomped snow from his boots. "Lost 2 heifers in the storm, found them froze together in a drift. The rest are in the south pasture where the windbreak is. They should be all right if the weather holds. Good work." Jack gestured toward Fiona. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Fiona Foster. Fiona, my ranch hands, Charlie Mason and Tom Webster." Both men pulled off their hats, nodding respectfully. "Madam," they said in unison, "Miss Foster's wagon overturned in the storm. She will be staying with us until travel is possible again." Jack's tone made it clear this was not up for discussion. "Tom, did you and Charlie get that leak in the barn roof patched?" "Yes, sir. Should hold through the rest of the winter." Tom, younger and lankier than Charlie, had the eager look of a puppy. "We also got all her goods stored in the tack room out of the way. Some of it got pretty wet, but most seems all right." "Thank you." Fiona smiled at them. "I appreciate you going back out in that storm to retrieve my things." "No trouble, madam." Charlie's weathered face crinkled into a smile. "Glad the boss found you when he did. That was a bad storm, one of the worst I have seen in 5 years in these mountains." The men stayed only long enough to warm up with coffee and a bowl of stew, then headed back to their cabin, leaving Jack and Fiona alone again. The evening passed pleasantly, with more conversation by the fire, and Fiona found herself laughing more than she had in months. Jack had a dry wit and a gift for storytelling, regaling her with tales from his army days that ranged from hilarious to harrowing. "And that is how I ended up standing guard duty in my underwear in the middle of January on the Kansas plains," he finished, grinning at her delighted laughter. "The captain never did find out who stole my uniform, though I had my suspicions. You must have frozen." Fiona wiped tears of mirth from her eyes. "I learned several important lessons that night. 1. Never fall asleep on guard duty. 2. Never trust a private named Murphy with a grudge. And 3. Revenge is a dish best served cold, preferably involving snow down someone's trousers." They talked until the fire burned low and Fiona could no longer stifle her yawns. Jack banked the coals, checked the locks on the doors and windows, and walked her to the bedroom. "Sleep well, Fiona. Tomorrow I will assess the roads and see how long it might be before you can continue your journey." "Thank you, Jack, for everything." She hesitated, then reached out and touched his arm lightly. "I know I keep saying it, but I truly mean it. You are a good man." His hand came up to cover hers, warm and solid. "You are easy to be good to. Good night." Fiona lay awake for a long time after he left, staring at the ceiling and trying to sort through the tangle of emotions in her chest. She had been raised to be practical, to avoid foolish romantic notions, but there was no denying the pull she felt toward Jack Sullivan. It was more than gratitude, more than simple attraction, though she felt that too. There was a rightness to his presence, a sense that she had found something she had not known she was looking for, but she was leaving as soon as the roads cleared. She had to. Catherine was expecting her, and Fiona had no reason to stay in Colorado, certainly not on a remote ranch miles from anywhere. Jack had given no indication that he wanted her to stay, beyond basic hospitality. He had been kind and friendly, but nothing more. She would be a fool to read more into it than that. And yet, as sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed of blue-green eyes and strong arms pulling her from the snow. The days that followed developed a comfortable rhythm. Fiona helped Jack around the house, cooking and cleaning despite his protests that she was a guest, not hired help. But she needed to feel useful, needed to contribute something to repay his hospitality, and cooking was something she did well. She made bread and pies, stews and roasts, using the supplies in his well-stocked pantry. Jack and the ranch hands ate with obvious appreciation, and Fiona felt a quiet satisfaction in feeding them. The weather remained cold but clear after the storm, and Jack took her on a tour of the ranch. Bundled in borrowed coats and scarves, they walked through snow that crunched under their boots, their breath forming clouds in the bright air. He showed her the cattle in their winter pasture, the horses in the barn, the various outbuildings and equipment. He explained his plans for expanding the herd, for adding more land, for building up the ranch into something substantial and lasting. Fiona listened, fascinated by his vision and determination. She had never met a man so certain of his path, so willing to work for what he wanted. Jack was not a dreamer spinning fantasies. He was a planner who took concrete steps toward his goals. And yet there was a poetry to the way he talked about the land, the animals, the changing seasons and what they brought. "This is my favorite time of day," he said one evening as they stood on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. "Everything is quiet, peaceful. You can almost hear the earth breathing. It is beautiful." Fiona pulled her borrowed shawl tighter against the cold. "I never imagined the frontier would be like this. I thought it would all be dust and violence, the way people talk about it back east. There is plenty of that too. The frontier is not an easy place, and it is not always beautiful. But there is beauty here if you know how to look for it." He turned to face her. "Do you think you will like California? Sacramento is a city very different from this." "I do not know. I have never been to California. I suppose I will find out." She kept her eyes on the mountains, not trusting herself to look at him. "My sister loves it, or so her letters say. She writes about flowers blooming in January and being able to ride in a wagon without a bonnet because the sun is not too harsh. That sounds nice." Jack's tone was carefully neutral. "When do you think you will leave?" "As soon as the roads are passable and I can arrange transportation." The words felt like stones in her mouth. "I have already imposed on your hospitality far too long. It has been 4 days. 4 days is nothing." "You are welcome to stay as long as you need." He paused. "Or want?" Fiona turned to look at him then, trying to read his expression in the fading light. His face was serious, those striking eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. "Jack, I cannot stay indefinitely. It would not be proper, and you have your life here. I do not want to be a burden." "You are not a burden, you are." He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "You are good company. The house feels different with you in it, better. But I understand if you need to continue your journey. Your sister is waiting, and you have your own life to build." Something in his voice made her bold. "What if I did not have to continue my journey? What if I had a reason to stay?" Jack took a step closer, and she could see the pulse beating in his throat. "What kind of reason?" Before she could answer, the dinner bell clanged from the bunkhouse, where Charlie and Tom were no doubt starving and hoping for whatever Fiona had cooked today. The moment broke, and Jack stepped back, running a hand through his hair in what she was beginning to recognize as a gesture of frustration. "We should go eat. Tom has been talking about your pot roast all day." He held out his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. That night, lying in Jack's bed and staring at the ceiling for what felt like the 100th time, Fiona made a decision. She would tell him the truth, all of it. She would tell him that she was not actually a widow, that she had no real reason to go to California beyond a vague plan to start fresh, somewhere new. She would tell him that she had felt more at home in the past 4 days than she had in years, and that the thought of leaving made her chest ache with a pain that had nothing to do with the cold. And if he did not feel the same way, if she had misread the warmth in his eyes and the careful way he found excuses to touch her hand or stand close to her, then at least she would know. At least she would not spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been if she had only been brave enough to speak. But when morning came, Fiona found Jack in the barn before breakfast, saddling his horse with quick, efficient movements that suggested trouble. "What is wrong?" She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. "Tom rode in from checking the north pasture. Says there are tracks, lots of them. Could be rustlers or it could be wolves, but either way I need to investigate." He tightened the cinch, checked his rifle. "I will be back by this evening. If I am not, tell Charlie to come looking." "Is it dangerous?" Fiona hated the fear that crept into her voice. "Probably not. Most likely it is just wolves and they will run when they see me coming." He swung into the saddle, then looked down at her. "But if something happens, if I do not come back, I want you to know that these past few days have been some of the best I can remember. Having you here has meant more to me than I can say." Before she could respond, he had kicked the horse into motion and was riding out of the barn into the gray morning light. Fiona stood in the doorway, watching until he disappeared over a rise, feeling as though she had missed her chance to say something important. The day dragged by with agonizing slowness. Fiona tried to keep busy, baking bread and mending a tear in one of Jack's shirts that she had found in a basket of laundry. Charlie and Tom came in for midday dinner, both quiet and tense, and she knew they were worried too, though they tried to hide it. "The boss can handle himself," Charlie assured her when he caught her staring toward the north for the 10th time. He spent 8 years in the cavalry dealing with everything the frontier could throw at him. A few wolves are nothing. But his words did little to ease the knot of anxiety in her stomach. She kept remembering the way Jack had looked at her before he rode out, the things he had almost said. What if something happened to him before she could tell him how she felt? What if the last words between them had been about pot roast and dinner bells? The sun was setting when she finally heard hoofbeats approaching. Fiona ran to the door, flinging it open to see Jack riding toward the house, and relief flooded through her with such force that her knees went weak. He was all right. He was safe. Then she saw the blood. It covered the front of his coat, stark red against the brown canvas, and his face was pale beneath the tan. He dismounted carefully, moving like an old man, and would have fallen if Charlie had not rushed forward to catch him. "Wolves," Jack managed through gritted teeth. "Got between them and their kill. One of them got me pretty good before I drove them off. Get him inside." Fiona's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Charlie, bring hot water and clean towels. Tom, fetch my medical kit from my trunk in the bedroom." They half-carried Jack to his bed, and Fiona immediately began stripping off his coat and shirt, revealing 3 deep gashes across his chest and shoulder. The wounds were still bleeding sluggishly, and she knew they needed to be cleaned and stitched quickly. "I need whiskey, needle, and thread, and more light," she said calmly, though her hands wanted to shake. She had helped her mother tend to sick neighbors in Boston, had learned basic nursing skills because they could not afford a doctor, but she had never dealt with anything quite this serious. Jack's eyes found hers. "I am all right, looks worse than it is." "You are an idiot." But she said it with such obvious affection that Charlie and Tom both grinned despite the situation. "You should have taken someone with you." "Next time I will." He winced as she began cleaning the wounds with whiskey-soaked cloth. though I hope there is not a next time. Those wolves were bigger than any I have seen, and meaner too. Fiona threaded the needle with steady hands and began stitching. Jack bore it stoically, jaw clenched, hands fisted in the blanket beneath him. She worked quickly but carefully, making small, neat stitches that would hold and, she hoped, scar minimally. When she finished, she bandaged his chest with strips of clean cotton and stepped back to assess her work. You will live, but you need to rest and let those heal. No working for at least a week, preferably 2. 2 weeks. Jack struggled to sit up, then groaned and lay back down. I cannot lay about for 2 weeks. There is too much to do. Charlie and I can handle things, Tom spoke up. You trained us well enough, boss. We know what needs doing. Listen to them, Fiona said firmly. You will do yourself no favors by tearing those stitches open and letting infection set in. Rest, heal, and then you can go back to being invincible. The corners of Jack's mouth quirked up. Yes, madam. Charlie and Tom left, and Fiona pulled a chair close to the bed, settling in to watch over her patient. Jack's eyes drifted closed, then opened again, fighting sleep. You were scared. He said it like a statement rather than a question. Of course I was scared. You rode out to face wolves alone, then came back bleeding like you had been in a knife fight. She smoothed the blanket over him with gentle hands. I thought you might not come back at all. Would that have bothered you? His eyes held hers. If I had not come back? Yes. The word came out barely above a whisper. It would have bothered me a great deal. More than it should, perhaps, given that we have known each other less than a week. But that is the truth, Jack. It would have destroyed me. His hand found hers on top of the blanket, his fingers threading through hers. I was thinking about you the whole time. When that wolf came at me, when I thought I might actually die out there in the snow, all I could think was that I never told you how I felt. That I never asked you to stay, not properly. Jack, let me finish. He squeezed her hand. I know it is too soon. I know you have plans, a sister waiting for you, a whole life ahead of you somewhere else. But these past days with you have shown me what I have been missing, what this house and this ranch have been lacking. I do not want you to go, Fiona. I want you to stay here with me. I want to wake up every morning and see you across the breakfast table. I want to come in from working and find you in my kitchen, filling the house with the smell of bread and something wonderful for dinner. I want to watch the sunset with you every evening and go to sleep knowing you are in the next room, safe and happy. Fiona felt tears prickling at her eyes. What are you saying? I am saying I am in love with you. Jack's voice was rough with emotion and pain. I know it is sudden. I know it is crazy, but I felt it almost from the moment I pulled you from that snowdrift, and it has only grown stronger every day since. You can tell me I am a fool. You can say it is too fast, too soon, but I will not take it back because it is the truth. You are a fool, she said, but she was smiling through her tears. A wonderful, brave, ridiculous fool, because I love you too, Jack Sullivan. I love the way you make me laugh and the way you treat me like an equal. I love your quiet strength and your unexpected gentleness. I love the life you have built here and the vision you have for the future. And I love that you were brave enough to say these things first, because I was terrified to speak. Jack pulled her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. Then stay, please. Marry me and stay here. We can build this life together. Yes. The word came easily, naturally, as though her whole life had been leading to this moment. Yes, I will marry you. I will stay. He tried to pull her down for a proper kiss, but the movement made him gasp in pain, and Fiona pushed him gently back against the pillows. You will rest now. We have all the time in the world for kissing once you are healed. But she leaned down and brushed her lips against his forehead, then his cheek, then, very carefully, his mouth. It was a gentle kiss, barely more than a touch, but it held a promise of everything to come. Jack slept, and Fiona kept watch through the night, occasionally changing his bandages and checking for fever. In the morning, she wrote a letter to her sister, explaining what had happened and her decision to stay in Colorado. She felt guilty about changing her plans, about leaving Catherine to wonder and worry, but she also felt a certainty in her bones that this was right. This was where she was meant to be. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange intimacy born of necessity. Fiona tended to Jack's wounds, helped him eat and wash, scolded him when he tried to do too much too soon. Jack, for his part, proved to be a terrible patient, restless and frustrated by his enforced inactivity, but he bore it with as much grace as he could muster because Fiona asked him to. They talked for hours, learning each other's histories and hopes and fears. Fiona told him about her childhood in Boston, about learning to read from her mother and numbers from her father, about the hunger and cold that had sometimes been their companions when work was scarce. She told him about the suitors she had rejected and why, about her determination to marry for love or not at all. Jack told her about his years in the cavalry, about the friends he had lost and the horrors he had seen, about the decision to leave that life behind and build something peaceful. He told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to create a place that would last, that he could eventually pass down to children if he was blessed to have them. "I want a family," he said one afternoon as they sat together on the bed, his healing wounds finally allowing him to sit up comfortably. "I want what my parents had before they died, a partnership, a real marriage of equals. I want children running through this house, making noise and mischief. I want to teach a son to ride and rope, and a daughter to be brave and strong. I want to grow old with someone I love, watching our grandchildren play in the same places we did. That sounds like a beautiful life." Fiona rested her head against his shoulder. "I want that too. I want to build something lasting with you. I want to fill this house with love and laughter. I want to be your partner in every sense of the word. You already are." Jack kissed the top of her head. "From the moment I pulled you from that snow, you became essential to me. I cannot imagine my life without you now." When Jack was finally well enough to move around the house without assistance, they began making plans. They would marry as soon as possible, a simple ceremony at Fort McDowell with Charlie and Tom as witnesses. Fiona would officially move her belongings into the ranch house, into Jack's room, into his life. They discussed practicalities like expanding the house to accommodate children eventually, like teaching Fiona to ride properly so she could help with ranch work if she wanted, like the garden she wanted to plant come spring. On a cold but clear December morning, 3 weeks after the storm that had brought them together, Jack and Fiona rode into Fort McDowell with Charlie and Tom trailing behind leading a pack horse with supplies. The trading post was exactly as Jack had described it, a collection of rough buildings clustered around a central square, with the American flag snapping in the wind above what passed for a town hall. The justice of the peace, a grizzled old-timer named Silas Humphrey who doubled as the postmaster, married them in his cramped office with Charlie and Tom standing as witnesses, and his wife playing "Here Comes the Bride" badly on a battered piano. Fiona wore her best dress, a dark green wool that brought out the color of her eyes, and carried a small bouquet of dried flowers that Tom had somehow procured. Jack wore clean trousers and a white shirt, his best vest, and a string tie, his dark hair slicked back and his face scraped clean of whiskers. They spoke their vows clearly and firmly, promising to love and honor each other for as long as they both lived. When Silas pronounced them man and wife, Jack pulled Fiona into his arms and kissed her with a thoroughness that made Charlie whistle and Tom blush. She kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all the love and gratitude and joy that filled her heart to overflowing. "I love you, Mrs. Sullivan," Jack murmured against her lips. "I love you too, Mr. Sullivan." She smiled up at him, this man who had saved her life and stolen her heart in the space of a few short weeks. "Now take me home." Home. The word felt perfect, felt right. The ranch was home now, more than Boston had ever been, more than anywhere else could ever be. Home was wherever Jack was, and she was going home with him forever. They celebrated with a dinner at the Trading Post's small restaurant, a meal of roast chicken and potatoes that everyone declared delicious, despite it being rather mediocre. But the food did not matter. What mattered was the warmth around the table, the easy laughter and genuine affection, the sense of rightness that permeated everything. As they rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon light, Fiona tucked against Jack's chest in the saddle just as she had been that first terrible day. She marveled at how much her life had changed. A month ago she had been alone and adrift, heading to California with only the vaguest of plans. Now she was married to a man she loved desperately, heading home to a ranch that felt like it had been waiting for her all along. "What are you thinking about?" Jack's breath was warm against her ear. "About how my wagon tipping over in that snowdrift was the best thing that ever happened to me." She tilted her head back to look at him. "If you had not found me, if you had not pulled me out and brought me here, I would never have known this kind of happiness existed. I think we were meant to find each other." Jack tightened his arm around her waist. "I do not usually believe in fate or destiny, but how else do you explain it? The storm, the accident, me being in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. Something larger than us brought you to me, Fiona, and I will be grateful for it every day for the rest of my life." The ranch house glowed with lamplight as they approached, smoke rising from the chimney into the darkening sky. Charlie and Tom had ridden ahead to start a fire and prepare the house, and when Jack and Fiona entered, they found the main room transformed. Someone had strung pine boughs over the doorways and set candles around the room. The table was set with the good dishes Fiona had found in the back of the cupboard, and a bottle of wine stood open and breathing. "We figured you might want some privacy your first night as man and wife," Charlie said with a grin. "Tom and I will make ourselves scarce, head into town for a few days, give you time to settle in." "You did not have to do that," but Jack was grinning too, "though we appreciate it." "Think nothing of it, boss, Mrs. Sullivan." Tom tipped his hat to Fiona. "We will see you in 3 days. Congratulations to you both." When they were alone, Jack pulled Fiona into his arms, holding her close and just breathing her in. "My wife," he said wonderingly. "You are actually my wife." "And you are my husband." She kissed his jaw, his cheek, his lips. "For the rest of our lives." They ate the dinner Charlie and Tom had prepared, though neither of them had much appetite. The air between them hummed with anticipation, with the knowledge that this night would mark a new beginning. When the meal was finished and the dishes cleared away, Jack took Fiona's hand and led her to the bedroom. He undressed her slowly, reverently, kissing each new bit of exposed skin as though she were something precious and rare. Fiona returned the favor, marveling at the strength in his body, the muscles built from years of hard work, the scars that told the story of his life. They came together with a tenderness that took her breath away, and later, with a passion that left them both shaking and gasping. Afterward, lying tangled together in the big bed, Fiona traced the healing scars on Jack's chest and thought about the randomness of life, the strange paths that led people to exactly where they needed to be. "I never thought I could be this happy," she whispered into the darkness. "I thought happiness was something other people had, something I might glimpse but never hold." Jack's arms tightened around her. "You deserve all the happiness in the world, and I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it. We will make each other happy." She kissed his shoulder. That is what marriage should be. Not one person serving the other, but both of them building a life together, brick by brick. I like that. His voice was already growing drowsy. Though I hope building our life together does not literally involve too many bricks. I am more of a wood frame kind of man. Fiona laughed softly and felt him smile against her hair. She drifted to sleep feeling safer and more content than she ever had in her life, wrapped in her husband's arms in their home. The winter passed in a haze of happiness. Fiona learned to manage the ranch house, developed her own routines and rhythms. She learned to cook on the temperamental wood stove, to bake bread that rose properly in the thin mountain air, to preserve vegetables and cure meat. She learned to spin wool from the sheep Jack kept for that purpose, to knit socks and scarves to keep them all warm through the long cold months. Jack taught her to ride properly, not side saddle like the ladies in Boston, but astride like a ranch woman. And Fiona discovered a love of riding she had never suspected. She learned to help with the easier ranch chores, to feed the chickens and collect eggs, to milk the cow, to groom horses and mend tack. She learned the names of all the cattle, or at least the ones who had names, and learned to recognize them by their markings. Charlie and Tom became like family, eating dinner at the main house most nights, sharing stories and jokes around the fire. They treated Fiona with respect and genuine affection, and she quickly grew fond of both of them. Charlie told terrible puns that made everyone groan, while Tom had a gift for harmonica that filled the evening with music. Spring came late to the mountains, but when it finally arrived, it came with a rush of green and a riot of wildflowers. Fiona planted her garden, working the soil with her hands, setting seeds and starts that Jack had brought back from town. She planted vegetables and herbs, flowers for the pure joy of them, and spent hours on her knees in the dirt, feeling more connected to the earth than she ever had walking the streets of Boston. One evening in late May, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains, Fiona turned to Jack with news she had been holding close for a week, wanting to be certain before she spoke. "I am with child." The words came out barely above a whisper, but she saw the way they hit Jack, the way his whole body went still. Truly. His hand found hers, gripping almost painfully tight. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be. I have missed my courses twice now, and I have been sick in the mornings. I have felt this exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to cure. My mother spoke of these things when Catherine was expecting." Fiona searched his face anxiously. "Are you happy? I know we have not talked about when we wanted to start a family. Happy?" Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. A child, Fiona, our child, growing inside you right now." He placed his hand on her belly, flat still but already holding the promise of new life, and Fiona covered his hand with hers. "We are going to be parents. You are going to be an amazing mother." Jack kissed her deeply. "And I am going to do everything in my power to be the father our child deserves." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into the fall. Fiona's body changed, her belly swelling until there was no hiding the life within. Jack became impossibly protective, trying to prevent her from doing anything that might be considered remotely strenuous, until Fiona had to firmly remind him that women had been having babies since the dawn of time, and most of them did not spend 9 months sitting in a chair. "I am not made of glass," she said with some exasperation when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I am pregnant, not dying. I need to move to work. I will go mad if you coddle me for 6 more months. I am just trying to keep you safe." But Jack backed off, though she often caught him watching her with worried eyes when she did anything more active than sitting and knitting. They spent the long summer evenings discussing names and plans. If the baby was a boy, Jack wanted to name him after his father, James. If it was a girl, Fiona wanted to name her after her mother, Mary. They talked about adding on to the house, creating a proper nursery, about the changes a child would bring to their lives. "Everything will be different," Fiona said one night, lying in bed with Jack's hand resting on her rounded belly. "Harder, certainly, more complicated, but better." Jack felt the baby kick against his palm and his face lit up with wonder. "So much better. This child will have everything we did not, Fiona. Two parents who love each other, a stable home, a future full of possibilities. We will give our children the world." "Children," Fiona raised an eyebrow. "Plural. Well, we will see how this one goes." But Jack was grinning. "I would not object to a house full of little ones, if you are willing. Ask me again after I have been through labor." But she was smiling too, imagining the house filled with the sounds of children playing and laughing. Catherine wrote regularly from California, and her letters were full of excitement about becoming an aunt. She sent patterns for baby clothes and advice, some useful and some ridiculous, and promises to visit as soon as she could make the journey. Fiona wrote back describing the ranch, her life with Jack, the strange and wonderful path that had led her to this place. She had no regrets about choosing Colorado over California, about building a life in the mountains instead of by the ocean. The baby came in late February, arriving in a rush after a labor that lasted through the night and into the following afternoon. Jack paced the main room while Charlie's wife Agnes, who had come to help with the birth, attended to Fiona in the bedroom. Every cry that escaped Fiona's lips made Jack wince, and he found himself praying to a God he had not spoken to in years, promising anything if only Fiona and the baby would be all right. When the baby's first wail finally pierced the air, Jack froze, listening. Then Agnes appeared in the doorway, her face wreathed in smiles. "You have a son, Jack, a big, healthy boy, and your wife is tired but doing well. Come meet your child." Jack entered the bedroom on shaking legs to find Fiona propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. And in her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket that Fiona had knitted herself, was the smallest person Jack had ever seen. "James," Fiona said softly. "James Aaron Sullivan. Come meet your father." Jack sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at his son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was currently squinting up at him with eyes that might turn any color. His tiny hands were curled into fists, and his mouth worked in what might have been an attempt to communicate or simply random baby movements. "He is perfect." Jack's voice was rough with emotion. "You did such an amazing job, Fiona. Thank you for our son. We made him together." Fiona was crying and smiling at the same time. "Look what we made, Jack. Look at this perfect little person who did not exist a year ago, and now he is here, and he is ours." Jack reached out one finger, and the baby's tiny hand immediately wrapped around it, gripping with surprising strength. Something in Jack's chest cracked open, a flood of love so intense it was almost painful. He would do anything for this child, he realized. He would walk through fire, fight armies, move mountains. This tiny person held his heart in those impossibly small hands. The early days of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Baby James was a good baby, as babies went, but he still required constant attention. Fiona fed him and changed him and walked him when he cried, and Jack helped as much as he could, learning to change diapers and swaddle and soothe. They took turns walking the floor at night when James would not sleep. singing lullabies and telling stories to the tiny person who could not possibly understand them, but seemed comforted anyway. Charlie and Tom were besotted with the baby, stopping by the house on flimsy excuses just to peek at him sleeping in his cradle. Agnes became a regular visitor, bringing meals and advice and an extra pair of hands when Fiona needed to sleep. The ranch became a community in a way it had not been before, bound together by shared joy in new life. As James grew from newborn to infant to baby, Fiona and Jack marveled at each new development. His first smile, his first laugh, the day he rolled over on his own. They documented everything, Fiona keeping a detailed journal and Jack writing letters to Catherine describing his nephew's achievements as though they were world-changing events. "He grabbed his toes today," Jack wrote seriously. "This seems like an important milestone, though I am not entirely sure why. Fiona says all babies discover their feet eventually, but it still seems remarkable that he figured out those belonged to him." Catherine wrote back with appropriate enthusiasm, and also with news that she and her husband would be visiting in the spring, as soon as travel was feasible. The thought of seeing her sister again, of introducing her to Jack and James and this life she had built, filled Fiona with happiness. The years that followed were full and rich. James grew into a sturdy toddler, then a rambunctious little boy with his father's blue-green eyes and his mother's dark hair. He trailed after Jack around the ranch, learning to ride almost before he could walk properly, absorbing everything about ranching and horses and cattle. When James was 3, Fiona gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Mary Catherine, called Katie by everyone. She had Jack's curls and Fiona's brown eyes, and she wrapped her father around her tiny finger from her first breath. Jack, who had thought he could not love another child as much as he loved James, discovered his heart simply expanded to encompass this new person. 2 years after Katie came another boy, Thomas Jack, called Tommy, who was quieter than his siblings but just as loved. And 2 years after that, the surprise arrival of twins, a boy and girl they named Samuel and Sarah. The house that had once seemed spacious now rang with the noise and chaos of 5 children, but Jack and Fiona would not have had it any other way. The ranch prospered. With hard work and careful management, Jack expanded the herd and the land. He built a reputation for quality horses and cattle, and buyers came from as far as Denver to purchase his stock. Charlie and Tom remained with them through the years, eventually marrying and building their own small houses on ranch land, their families intertwining with the Sullivans until the ranch felt like a small village. Fiona's garden grew every year, providing vegetables and fruit for the whole community. She learned to can and preserve, to make jams and pickles, to smoke meat and bake bread that was legendary throughout the territory. She taught the children their letters and numbers, reading to them from the growing collection of books that filled the shelves Jack had built. She sewed their clothes, tended their scrapes and illnesses, and loved them with a fierceness that sometimes surprised her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jack took Fiona back to the place where they had met, the spot where her wagon had overturned in the Snowdrift. It was summer now, the pass green and lush, wildflowers carpeting the meadows. The ravine was barely visible, just a shallow dip that seemed impossibly small to have caused such a catastrophic accident. "I think about that day often," Jack said, his arm around Fiona's waist as they stood looking at the spot. "About how many things had to align perfectly for me to be there at exactly that moment. If I had checked the north pasture instead of the west, if I had left 5 minutes earlier or later, if the storm had been less severe, or if your wagon had not overturned in exactly that spot. You would have died, Fiona, and I never would have known what I was missing," But those things did not happen. Fiona leaned against him, solid and warm and utterly dear. You were there. You pulled me out, you brought me home, and we built this life together, Jack. Everything we have, everything we are, it all started right here. I love you. He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face. I have loved you since the moment I saw your eyes open in that snowdrift. I will love you until the day I die, and if there is anything beyond death, I will love you there too. I love you too. She kissed him deeply, pouring 10 years of partnership and passion and deep affection into it. You are my everything, Jack Sullivan. My husband, my partner, the father of my children, my best friend. I cannot imagine my life without you in it. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, looking at the place where their story had begun. Then they mounted their horses and rode back to the ranch, back to the house full of noise and children and love, back to the life they had built from a chance meeting in a snowstorm. The years continued to pass, bringing changes as all years do. The children grew, each developing their own personality and interests. James became a skilled horseman and rancher, learning everything Jack could teach him and clearly destined to take over the ranch someday. Katie surprised everyone by developing a passion for numbers and accounts, taking over the ranch's bookkeeping when she was barely 12, and managing it better than Jack ever had. Tommy loved books and learning, devouring every volume in the house and begging for more, and Fiona secretly hoped he might become a teacher someday. The twins, Samuel and Sarah, were inseparable and full of mischief, keeping everyone on their toes. Catherine and her family became regular visitors, making the journey from California every year or two. The cousins played together and wrote letters in between visits, maintaining a connection across the miles. Catherine's children loved the ranch, loved the freedom and space and adventure it represented, and Fiona loved watching her sister's face as she took in the life Fiona had built. You are happy, Catherine said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the children play. Truly, deeply happy. I can see it in everything you do. I am. Fiona did not have to think about her answer. Happier than I ever imagined possible. This life, this place, this man, these children, it is everything I did not know I wanted. I am so glad you tipped your wagon over in that snowdrift. Catherine squeezed her hand. If you had made it to California, you would have been welcome, you know that. But you never would have found this. You never would have found Jack. I think about that sometimes. About all the different paths my life could have taken, all the different choices I could have made. But this is the path I was meant to walk. I am certain of it. When Jack's hair began to silver at the temples and Fiona found her first gray hairs, they did not mourn the passing of youth. Instead, they celebrated the years they had shared, the life they had built, the love that had only deepened with time. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset over the mountains, hands linked, still finding new things to talk about after all these years. Do you remember what you said to me that first day? Fiona asked one evening. When you pulled me from the snow, I told you that you were coming home with me. Jack smiled at the memory. I did not ask. I just told you it was presumptuous. It was perfect. She rested her head on his shoulder. Because this was always home, even before I knew it existed. You were always home. All I had to do was find you. Their grandchildren began to arrive as James and then Katie married and started their own families. The ranch house, expanded several times over the years, filled with new voices and new laughter. Jack taught his grandchildren to ride just as he had taught his children, patient and kind and full of stories. Fiona baked cookies and pies, told stories, and marveled at how the circle of life continued, each generation building on what came before. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren, Charlie and Tom and their families, friends from town and neighboring ranches. They roasted a whole steer and danced under the stars, and when Jack pulled Fiona into his arms for a slow waltz, she felt 18 again, full of hope and possibility. 30 years, Jack murmured against her hair. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I would do it all again. Fiona looked up at him, at the face she knew better than her own, at the eyes that still made her heart skip a beat. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. I would choose you every single time, Jack. You have given me the most incredible life. His voice was thick with emotion. A life I never dreamed possible when I was a soldier sleeping on the frozen ground. A life full of love and family and purpose. You have given me everything, Fiona. We gave it to each other. She kissed him softly. That is what love is it not? Choosing each other every day through everything, building something together that neither of us could have built alone. They danced until the stars wheeled overhead and the music finally stopped, until the younger ones had drifted off to bed, and only the two of them remained, swaying gently in the moonlight. The ranch continued to thrive under James's management as Jack gradually stepped back, content to advise rather than direct. He and Fiona spent more time traveling, visiting Catherine in California, exploring parts of the West they had never seen. But they always returned to the ranch, to the home they had built together, because that was where their hearts lived. They grew old together, the years carving lines on their faces but never dimming the love in their eyes when they looked at each other. They held hands on the porch watching sunset after sunset, counting grandchildren and then great-grandchildren, marveling at the legacy they had created. I used to think about dying alone, Jack said one evening when they were both well into their 70s. Before I met you, when I thought I would probably live and die a bachelor rancher with no one to mourn me but my horses. But then I pulled you from that snowdrift and you changed everything. We saved each other. Fiona's voice was soft. You saved my body and I saved your soul. That is what love does. It makes us better than we were alone. They sat in companionable silence, watching the mountains turn purple and gold in the fading light. Somewhere inside the house, they could hear the sounds of family. Children laughing, someone playing piano, voices raised in conversation and affection. The ranch that had started with just the two of them now teemed with life, with love, with the future they had built together. Jack Sullivan died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, with Fiona beside him as she had been for more than 50 years. His last words to her were, "I love you," the same words he had said to her countless times throughout their life together, and she whispered them back, holding his hand until his breathing stilled and he was gone. The grief was enormous, overwhelming, a physical weight on her chest. But Fiona did not collapse under it. She stood at his funeral surrounded by their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, by friends and neighbors whose lives Jack had touched, and she spoke of the man she had loved, the life they had shared, the legacy he left behind. "He saved my life," she said simply. "And then he spent the rest of his life showing me what living really meant. He was the best man I have ever known, and I was blessed beyond measure to be his wife. Our love story began in a snowdrift, but it grew into something warm and lasting and real. And it does not end with his death. It continues in all of you, in the family we created together, in the values he taught, and the love he gave so freely. Jack Sullivan will never truly be gone because he lives on in all of us." Fiona lived another 5 years after Jack's death, surrounded by family, content in the knowledge that she had lived a full and meaningful life. She spent her days working in her garden, reading to great-grandchildren, sharing stories of the past with anyone who would listen. She spoke often of Jack, keeping his memory alive, making sure the youngest ones who had never known him still understood what kind of man he had been. On a cold December morning, exactly 54 years after the storm that had brought them together, Fiona Foster Sullivan passed quietly in her sleep. She was buried beside Jack on a hilltop overlooking the ranch, under a simple headstone that read, "Together Forever." Their story became legend in the family, told and retold to each new generation. The story of how a wagon overturned in a snowdrift, how a cowboy pulled a woman from the snow and told her she was coming home with him, how that chance meeting grew into a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was a story about courage and kindness, about taking chances and building something lasting, about the extraordinary things that can grow from the most ordinary moments. The ranch continued, passed down through generations, but at its heart it remained what Jack and Fiona had built, a home filled with love. The house they had expanded and renovated over the years still stood, still filled with family, still echoing with laughter and life. The land they had worked so hard to improve and maintain continued to support cattle and horses, continued to provide a living for their descendants. And sometimes, on winter evenings when snow falls soft and thick over the mountains, those who live on the ranch swear they can see two figures walking hand in hand across the pastures, heading home together just as they did so many years ago. A cowboy and the woman he pulled from a snowdrift, bound together by chance and choice, and a love that not even death could diminish. Their great-great-grandchildren tell the story still, sharing it with their own children, making sure that Jack and Fiona Sullivan are never forgotten. They tell about courage and love, about building a life from nothing, about the importance of family and home. They tell about how sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best, how disaster can become blessing, how a single act of kindness can change everything. And they always end the story the same way, with the words that began it all, the words that became legend in the family. "You are coming home with me." Those words, spoken on a frozen mountain pass in the winter of 1875, became the foundation of a dynasty. They represented not just a rescue, but a promise of safety and partnership, of building something together, of choosing love even when it seemed impractical or impossible. They represented everything that Jack and Fiona created together in their decades of marriage: a home, a family, a legacy that would outlast them both. The ranch stands still, a testament to what two people can build when they commit fully to each other and to a shared vision. The land they claimed from wilderness has been passed down through 5 generations now, and it continues to thrive. The house has been updated and expanded, but the original structure remains at its core, the rooms where Jack and Fiona lived and loved and raised their children. In the main room, above the stone fireplace that has warmed the house for more than a century, hangs a portrait. It shows a young couple, the woman with dark hair and warm eyes, the man with a weathered face and gentle smile. They stand close together, his arm around her waist, both of them looking at the camera but clearly more aware of each other than anything else. It was painted from a photograph taken on their 10th wedding anniversary, and it captures something essential about them: the love, the partnership, the deep connection that bound them together. Below the portrait, carved into the mantel, are words that Jack carved there himself many years ago. "Home is not a place. It is wherever we are together." Those words guide the family still, reminding them of what truly matters. Not wealth or success or status, but love and connection and the bonds we forge with other people. Jack and Fiona understood that, lived it every day of their lives together, and pass that understanding down to their children and grandchildren and beyond. Their love story, which began with such drama and uncertainty, ultimately became a quiet testament to the power of commitment and partnership. They weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. They faced challenges and hardships, celebrated joys and triumphs. They raised children and built a business and created a community. They did it all together, supporting each other, believing in each other, loving each other with a constancy that never wavered. And it all began because a wagon tipped over in a snowdrift, and a cowboy pulled a woman out and said, "You are coming home with me." Those 7 words changed 2 lives, created a family, built a legacy. They represent the best of what the frontier was supposed to be: opportunity and courage, kindness and determination, the chance to build something new and lasting. Jack and Fiona Sullivan took that chance, embraced it fully, and created something beautiful that continues to flourish long after they are gone. Their story reminds us that love can come from the most unexpected places, at the most unexpected times, that a single moment can change everything. That courage means not just facing danger, but opening your heart to possibility. That home is not where you are born, but where you choose to build your life. That family is the legacy we leave behind, the love we pour into other people that continues long after we are gone. The mountains still stand tall over the Sullivan Ranch, snow-capped and magnificent. The sun still sets in glory over the western peaks, painting the sky in shades of fire. The wind still whispers through the pines, carrying stories of the past to those who know how to listen. And somewhere in that wind, if you listen very carefully, you might hear echoes of laughter and love, the voices of a cowboy and the woman he saved, still together, still home. This is the story of Jack and Fiona Sullivan, who found each other in a snowstorm and built a love that lasted beyond their lifetimes. It is a story of the American West, of the people who shaped it and were shaped by it. But most of all, it is a story about love, how it finds us, how it changes us, how it endures. And like all the best love stories, it has a simple beginning and a profound truth at its heart. A wagon tipped over in a snowdrift. A cowboy pulled her out. And everything that came after, all the love and life and family, began with 5 simple words. You are coming home with me. Home. It was always about home, about finding the place and the person where you belong. Fiona found her home in Jack's arms, on a ranch in the Colorado mountains, in a life she never imagined but embraced completely. Jack found his home in Fiona's love, in the family they created together, in the knowledge that he was no longer alone in the world. Together, they built something that mattered, something that lasted, something that continues to touch lives more than a century after they are gone. They proved that love is not just an emotion but a choice, a commitment, a daily decision to put another person's happiness on par with your own. They showed that the best relationships are partnerships, where both people bring their strengths and support each other through weaknesses. Their descendants carry forward the lessons Jack and Fiona taught through their example. They carry forward the understanding that family is precious, that hard work builds character, that love is worth fighting for. They carry forward the story, making sure that new generations understand where they came from, whose shoulders they stand on, what sacrifices and choices created the life they now enjoy. And so the story ends where it must, with love triumphant and family flourishing, with a legacy secured, and a love that proved stronger than death itself. Jack and Fiona Sullivan rest together on their hilltop, overlooking the land they loved and the home they built, forever together as they always promised to be. The ranch continues. The family grows. The love endures. And the story, passed down through generations, reminds everyone who hears it that magic can be found in the most ordinary moments if only we are brave enough to reach for it. That love can bloom in snowstorms and grow in harsh climates. That home is wherever we choose to build it, with whoever we choose to love. This is their story, complete and whole from beginning to end. From a frozen moment of terror in a snowdrift to a lifetime of love and partnership, from two solitary people to a family dynasty, from a simple rescue to a legacy that will outlast them all. It is a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth carrying forward into the future. And it all began with a cowboy who saw a woman who needed help, who pulled her from the snow without hesitation, and who had the courage and certainty to say the words that would change both their lives forever. "You are coming home with me. Home. Together. Forever." That is what love looks like. That is what it means to truly commit to another person. That is the lesson Jack and Fiona Sullivan taught through their lives and their love, and it is a lesson that remains as relevant and powerful today as it was in 1875. Their story is finished, but its echoes continue. In every marriage built on partnership and respect, in every family that chooses love over convenience, in every person who has the courage to take a chance on love, even when it seems impossible or impractical. Jack and Fiona's legacy is not just in their descendants, but in the example they set, the proof they provided that love really can conquer all, that two people committed to each other really can build something lasting and beautiful. The wagon tipped over in the snowdrift on a cold December day in 1875. The cowboy pulled her out and told her she was coming home with him. And from that moment forward, they walked through life together, hand in hand, building a love story for the ages. This was their story, their legacy, their gift to all who came after. A story of love found in the most unlikely place, nurtured through dedication and commitment, and ultimately triumphant over every obstacle life could present. And now, more than a century later, their story ends with the same certainty with which it began. With two people who loved each other completely, who built a life together that mattered, who left the world better than they found it, who proved that love really is the most powerful force in the universe. Jack and Fiona Sullivan lived, loved, and created something eternal. Their story is complete, their love is immortal, and their legacy continues in every person who hears their tale and believes, even for a moment, that true love really does exist. The end has come, but the love remains, echoing through generations, proving that some bonds are too strong for even death to break. This was their story, told in full from beginning to end, from tragedy to triumph, from rescue to romance to a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It is finished now, complete and whole, a testament to what two people can build when they choose each other every single day. "You are coming home with me." 5 words that changed everything. 5 words that built a dynasty. 5 words that prove love is always worth the risk. Home. Together. Forever, always.